What's up, Conkers? Hope everybody is having a fantastic day as usual. This video is going to be a video on micro tips, how to master micro, how to get better at micro. I've got a lot of different tips in this video. They'll be split out in chapters, so you can see that on the bar below the YouTube video, so you can skip any that you don't want to see or jump to ones that you're really interested in. Now, I spent a lot of time on these videos, so if you do enjoy this video after you watch the whole thing, please drop a like. And if you want to see more gameplay and guides from myself, please just subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed, and let's get into it. Now, as far as micro goes, what we're really going to be talking about today is combat micro. We're not talking about like economic micro, micro with villagers, all that stuff. We're really talking about combat micro. And we're going to start with the basics and then move into more intermediate level micro and then advanced micro in this video. So the first thing we're really going to talk about here are control groups. Now, most, I would actually assume, of you are really familiar with control groups and already use them. Now, if you're not already familiar with control groups, the easiest way to create one is select the units you want in a control group. So, for example, if they're in a control group, you can see the numbers over their head. If they're not, they'll have no numbers over their head. If you select the units, and then you hold control, and you click, it can be any number, 1 through 0, essentially. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. You can assign them to a control group. Now, in settings, you can actually preset some control groups. Like, my barracks doesn't show 5 here, but if I click the number 5, my barracks will be selected. 6 for range, 7 for stable, 9 for uvu, 0 for town center. So there are some keys that I just have set in the settings that are always the same. Now, my units, I would say I don't always have them on the same control group. Sometimes I switch them. It depends how many groups I'm using. So I have some which are preset, like siege workshops are 4 as well. Markets are 8. Now, I normally have my control groups as cavalry 1. And if I'm using 2 sets of cavalry, I'll have cavalry 1 and cavalry 2. And if you want to make it easier on yourself when you're raiding, you can say like cavalry 1's on the left side, cavalry 2's on the right side raiding. That's how you can remember it. Now, if I'm in a big battle, sometimes I'll even go 3 groups of cavalry if I'm really raiding. If I'm in a big battle and I'm trying to micro, a lot of the time I'll have my cavalry on 1, my archers on 2, and my spearmen on 3. But if I'm struggling with my micro and I want to make it even easier, I'll just do my cavalry on 1 and all of my infantry, regardless of melee or range, on 2. Now, it does hurt your micro with your archers a bit. So the one thing you can always do if you didn't want to hurt your archer micro, which we'll talk about more later, is you just kind of leave the spears in the back and you really just focus on microing the cavalry and the archers, and you can pull in the spears when you really need them. So that's kind of the very basics on control groups, and you're going to see as we kind of move through these tips how control groups apply to a lot of these different tips. And so control groups is tip number 1. Let me know if you have any questions about that, and we'll move to tip number 2 here. The second micro tip that I want to talk about today are target fire. and shift right click. So there's two different types of attack, and the first time we're going to talk about target fire, and the next tip we'll talk about the attack move. Now, target fire is when you just select your units and you right click on an enemy. That's called target fire. Now, target fire is very useful in a lot of situations. Like, for instance, if you're trying to get your counter units to attack a specific unit, then a lot of the time you're going to target fire with archers or crossbows or a ranged unit. Then it can be very effective because instead of your archers shooting knights if you're using attack move, which we'll talk about next, you want to target fire with your archers. So you'll focus the spearmen in the enemy army, or you'll focus the crossbows on the backline in the enemy army by using the target fire, which is just right-clicking the enemy unit. Now, one problem with target fire is if you have a giant mass of archers, they can do what we call as overkill, which they'll do way more damage than actually there is HP or life on an enemy unit. So you have to be a little careful when you're just target firing units. Sometimes you can even split up your archer or range masses into two groups to solve that overkill problem. The second thing with target fire is instead of just the right click, you can actually use the shift right click. So let's say that you're in a battle and you want your archers to shoot out spears in the enemy army, and so you've been target firing. Well, if you're fully engaged, you can actually shift right click, which means you click right on the first one while holding shift, and you click all of the spearmen. It will actually queue up which spearmen your archers are going to shoot, which is really effective. And you can do the same, like if there are crossbows on the backline shooting your knights, the archers, you can shift right click the crossbows. Now, this will make life a lot easier because you don't really have to micro after that. You just tell them which ones to shoot. But my one word of warning is, let's say you click like 10 spears in a row. If the next spear in line has already died, then it kind of breaks that chain, right? And then your archers will just start shooting whatever units are closest to them again. So that's my second tip in micro as far as target firing and shift right clicks. Micro tip number 3 is called the attack move. And again, a lot of you are probably familiar with the attack move if you've been playing ranked Age of Empires. But if you're not, it's a basic command. I'm going to explain it quickly. Now, if you select units and you click the button A, your cursor will basically turn into this little sword. And then once you click again on the ground, your units will attack anything that is closest to them. Now, this does prioritize units over buildings. I'll talk about that a little more in a minute. But the attack move is a pretty basic command. Like normally when you're in fights, especially if you're microing your archers or knights, you're just using the attack move command. You're not clicking on a specific unit. Most of the time you're just clicking the ground with attack move, and then your units are attacking everything that's close to them. Now sometimes your units can get a little confused. They're not always the smartest. And so if something is just slightly out of the range of your units and there's an enemy building nearby or a wolf or a boar, they'll attack that instead. So you have to be careful when using the attack move. But the attack move can be really good. It saves you a lot of micro because your units do just attack the units that are closest to them. Now, the fourth micro tip I want to talk about is really one of the most important tips, and that's called kiting. And you can really kite with any units, though it's typically kiting is referred to when you're using your archers. There's lots of different units you can kite with, but we're going to specifically talk about archers in this specific scenario. And we've got, square formation archers versus archers in line formation. So a lot of times you'll see guys split their archers into this line formation. And the reason they do that is because when they're kiting, they're using the attack move most of the time. And when archers are in this line formation, it's more likely that the archers are going to hit more units rather than overkilling units, like we talked about earlier. So kiting in and of itself, what it is it's getting the shot off with the archers, then running. Getting the shot off with the archers, then running. It's like guerrilla warfare almost, right? Like, You're getting a shot in, then you're running away until your archer's ready to shoot again. Right? Because like every unit has an attack speed. So you're shooting, then for lack of a better term, your archers are reloading, then you're shooting again, and you're running in between those shots. And so, you know, I've had some examples running of archers kiting, and archers can be quite difficult to catch and kill when they're kiting like this. You can get a lot of value out of archers kiting and shooting opponent units. It doesn't matter, even if they're counter units. If you get enough archers and are kiting, archers are going to do quite a lot of damage. So, the micro tip is, regardless of your army size versus theirs, a lot of times you can get off a lot of easy kills by just using kiting. Like you run in, snipe some villas, and then kite your way away from the opponent. Now we're going to look in tip number 5 about kiting plus control groups and kind of how that works and what that looks like in real time. So micro tip number 5, we're going to talk about kiting with control groups and different unit compositions. Now, the most common, I would say, kiting with control groups that you're ever going to see in Age of Empires is 2 compositions, which is Knight Archer against Spear Archer. And when kiting comes into play in different unit compositions, you'll do kiting with all units. So Knight Archer versus Spear Archer is a classic matchup, and there's always kind of this dance that happens in this matchup, right? So your spears, you always want to get your spears to kill the knights, and you want your archers to kill the enemy archers. And then the guy using Knight Archer, he wants his archers to kill the spears, so then his knights can clean up the archers. So you get into this micro dance, right? And what happens is the knights are going to fake a charge and cause the enemy to bring his spears forward. And then you're going to pull the knights away while your archers shoot the spears. And then because your knights are pulling away, he's going to pull back his spears and try to kill your archers with his archers. And once his archers have stepped up, you send in the knights to make him pull up his spears so your archers can shoot the spears. So it's kind of this constant back and forth kiting. When you get in these battles, you're trying to micro. This is very micro intensive. You're using control groups and kiting at the same time. You're sending in the knights. You're trying to get the spears to come up so your archers can shoot the spears. And a lot of the time in these situations, I will shift right-click on spears with my archers. And then I'll just kite my knights in and out to try to bring the spears forward and try to get a charge off on the archers. So there's a real art to doing this. But if you can practice that in your games, that's a really good one to practice. And if you can kind of master that micro, you can kill a lot of people with the Knight Archer combo. Tip number 6 is that when you're winning a battle, you're going to want to surround your enemy, and what I kind of call the move through. So let's say you have 2 big armies collide, and you realize you're winning the battle, like you're for sure going to win the battle, and you know your enemy, they'll actually start retreating so that they're, not going to suffer as many losses. So what I do when I realize I'm definitely going to win the battle, I go ahead and I start moving with my units. Like I'll run through the enemy basically. I'm going to start running towards their base because they're going to retreat towards their base. And that essentially helps cut them off from the retreat, or during their retreat, they will lose even more units. If they start retreating before you started kind of moving through their units, then they're going to be able to get a lot of the losses out of that. So that's tip number 6. Once you're for sure winning a battle, go ahead and start moving through the units to cut off their retreat and defeat the entire army. Micro tip number 7 is going to involve the Knight Charge mechanic. Now, there's a specific mechanic in the game where you can bait out, you can bait out the spears to brace. And the spears bracing, if the knights charge into that, they essentially get skewered, it stops the charge, and the spears get a hit. Now, if you're charging with the knights, you can actually cause the spears to go ahead and brace. You stop charging, and then you recharge into the spears, and you get all of your charge damage off on the spears. Now, this is a micro tip that players all throughout the game are using. It's a very, very important micro tip. This is probably one of the most important when you're playing against in a big fight, or if you're just trying to pick off some spears with a few knights. If you charge in, bait out the spear brace, then you can recharge and hit the spears with the knight charge. Now, the other thing that I would say coincides with this is if your knights are within their minimum distance of charging, which is 1 tile away, you can actually trigger the knight charge on the unit right beside the knight if, for instance, you A-click on a unit that's farther away that is within the knight range. Because the knight will be getting the command to charge a unit in its charge range further away, but the charge will hit the first unit that's in front of it. So I've got some examples there for you. If you have any questions about that micro specifically, please let me know in the comments below. Tip number 8, again, involves knight charge mechanics. Now, this knight charge mechanic, essentially when we're playing against a bigger mass of units and we have our knights, or just if we have the opportunity to get a charge when there's less units there, you kind of want to use like guerrilla warfare again, kiting with knights, but with knights, you're going to hit enemy mass with your charge and then you're going to leave. And so you're literally kiting in and out against larger masses of opponents, or smaller if you're trying to pick some units off, by getting a charge on the enemies, then leaving. Getting a charge on the enemies, then leaving. Getting a charge on the enemies, then leaving. And you'll deal considerable amounts of damage with your knights to enemy units if you begin to implement this micro tip. Tip number 9 is another knight micro mechanic, because micro with knights is really important, so we're getting a few of them here. Now, with knights, you can actually re-trigger their charge. So this scenario is, let's say you have a knight and you're charging after the opponent and they're running away, so your charge isn't going to hit them. Well, what you actually want to do here is cancel your charge by doing something like clicking on the ground, just moving in their direction. And then if you click on the enemy unit again, your knights will begin recharging. So as long as you don't what you don't want to do is you don't want to trigger a charge when you're chasing someone and let the charge run out. What you want to do is start charging if they're going to get out of range, basically cancel your charge by just normally chasing them, and then you can re-trigger the charge again. You can also use this, because charge is faster than normal movement speed, to catch up to units that are far in front of you. Tip number 10. If you're ever playing against a mass of archers or archer ball, whatever you'd like to call them, and you're using cavalry to attack this archer or crossbow ball, we'll just call it range ball for ease here. What you want to do with your horsemen or knights is not nip at their heels. You know, if they're kiting you, you really don't want to nip at their heels, as I'd call it, which is chasing them. What you want to do is you want to run past the range ball and then surround it and attack. So you don't really want to attack the units at the back of the range ball, because they'll just keep kiting and shooting you. You want to run past the enemy archers or range ball, surround them, and then a move, because you'll have as many of them trapped as possible. And with the way horsemen and knights work, more of your horsemen and knights will be able to attack the range ball at the same time due to limitations on their melee range. So tip number 11, micro tip number 11, has to do with body blocking, and there's 2 ways I think about body blocking. And one of these, first example, could be an enemy villager's trying to run away from your archers, and so you body block the enemy villager with your scout, so your archers can catch up and shoot the villager. Body blocking essentially means running in front of the enemy unit, and you're using your unit's hitbox to block their movement. So you have to move back and forth to block their movement. Now, secondly, I also think about body blocking as pinning enemy units against resources. Like if you're trying to catch up against enemy units, or they're trying to retreat, or you're able to pinch their villagers on a gold mine or wood line, you can essentially surround them and body block them / pinch them against those resources and then kill them. That's going to be really, really effective in raiding. We'll talk about raiding in the next tip, but those are my 2 body blocking tips. Tip number 12 has to do with raiding. Now, I could talk to you guys about raiding for probably 3 hours on end. I'm a bit of a master raider myself, being as I normally play an all-cavalry strat with Mongol, which revolves around raiding. It is a raiding style of play, which heavily involves killing villagers. So, a quick micro tips on raiding if you want to become better raider is a lot of it comes with distracting your opponent, right? So my first tip on raiding is if you're going to raid, you want to distract your opponent at the front of their base and slip in cavalry in the back of the base. So every time your opponent's attacked, an alert symbol goes off on their mini-map. We're all familiar with this, and then it attracts your attention. So what you want to do as your raiding tip here for number 12 is attack with the main army up front, and as that alert signal up front is triggered, your opponent will look there, and at the same time you want knights to be wrapping around on the back line, whether that's at the wood line or gold line or wherever that might be. So you hit your opponent as soon as that front end alert is about to trigger, you slip in knights on the back wood line, and a lot of the time opponents won't even see it and you'll get some villager kills. So that's our raiding tip for tip number 12. Tip number 13 is also a raiding tip because I love raiding. Now this is going to talk about split raiding forces when raiding, so you can do the same thing in number 12 as you do in 13, where you cause some commotion at the front of the base with your army, and instead of having one raiding force go in at the same time, you have multiple go in at the same time. Now how do we really time this up? Now, the best way to do that is to shift-click units to raid your opponent while you attack from the front, right? So we'll use our army to attack from the front at the exact same time that our shift-clicked raids are going to hit. So you attack at the front of the opponent's base, and let's say you've got like 2 or 3 raids shift-clicked up. So as you attack, your opponent gets the alert symbol at the front of their base, and then you have, knight or 2 going on their wood line, gold mine, and their deer that they're out on. And you're going to wreak some real havoc if you use those raiding tips against your opponents. Micro tip number 14 is going to involve dodging mangonel shots, which is going to be really important for the livelihood of your army and ranged mass if you want to keep them alive. Now, dodging mangoes in Castle Age is pretty easy. In Imperial Age, it becomes a lot harder because after adjustable crossbars comes through, the area of effect on mangoes is quite high. Now, dodging mangonel shots with range units, essentially what you want to do is the mangonel is going to shoot where your units are, right? So as the mangonel begins to shoot, if you then move your units, it will still shoot where your units were. It's not going to follow your units. It does not have target tracking like it used to. So, tip number 14, you can dodge mangonel shots by when the mangonel begins shooting at your units, you can move your units, and the mangonel shots will shoot where your units used to be. Micro tip number 15 also involves mangonels. Now, we talked about dodging mangonels in the last tip. If you don't feel comfortable dodging mangonels, or if there are just so many mangonels you really can't dodge them, which does happen sometimes, you can try to use the wide formation against mangonels. It spreads your units out so that the mangonel AoE damage will not do as much damage to your units as a whole. Now, there are some issues with this formation, like not as many of your units are going to get on the front line, and then once they get crunched up in battle, the mangonel shots can still hit them for large AoE effects. But a lot of the time when trying to engage against these mangonels or spread out the damage where your units aren't taking AoE damage from mangonels in clumps, the wide formation can be very useful. Tip number 16 involves defending your base. And when we're defending our base, especially if we have large amounts of range units or we have siege in the base, we want to use natural choke points in the base to defend. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean what you could generally consider streets or alleyways between your buildings where only certain amounts of units can fit, right? So For example, if you've got an opponent diving your base with, knights and spearmen with just some ranged units, but you're predominantly using archer crossbow, you might have some siege in there. You really want to use these choke points when defending, because less of their units are going to be able to get on top of your units to hit you because of these choke points, and all of your ranged mass can shoot the enemy when they're trying to come in your base, as they are ranged units. So this is generally, tip number 16 is generally using choke points against melee units when you have ranged units, but the choke points always come in handy when you're defending your base. Tip number 17 also involves defending your base. And I've got to tell you now, stop fighting right outside of your base, not under your defensive structures. Okay, so one of the number one things I see people do, which makes them lose games, is you've got towers and you've got your town center and you've got these defensive structures in your base, but you don't fight under them. Right? And why would you walk outside of your base to take a fight and lose it, and then, have your base dove by your enemy? So if someone's pushing on your base, use your defensive structures, right? Use the defensive structures to aid you so that you can beat what's likely the numerically superior army back out of your base. Defensive structures are how you successfully defend, right? Because otherwise, if you're just taking a fight in the open field, you'll lose. So micro tip number 17, this is more of just a combat tip in general, but use your defensive structures. Tip number 18 is a fun little tip. If you are getting attacked and you don't have enough garrison space for your villagers, you can garrison your villagers in and out of the town center, and the best way to do this is, let's say you have, knights chasing your villagers around the town center. Well, you can ungarrison your villagers on one side of the TC, the 15 that are in the TC. Let's say you ungarrison on the right side and you garrison the villagers that are getting chased on the left side. And then the knights move around to the right side of your town center to hit the villagers on the right side of your town center. And you ungarrison villagers on the left side, and you garrison the villagers on the right side. So, fun little tip. I use this a lot, actually, when someone's trying to dive my base, is you can micro villagers in and out of your town center to keep them alive pretty effectively if you're low on garrison space and you've got villagers out in the open. What's up, Conquerors? Hope everybody enjoyed that video. Those are 18 great micro tips to help you in mastering micro to make you a better Age of Empires 4 player. If you watched all the way to the end of the video and you enjoyed it, please drop a like to support the channel and gain traction on the video. It really helps me out. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel and you learned something from this video, please subscribe to the channel to support the channel. Now, if there's anything I missed in here, there's a lot of micro tips that I could have put in the video, but I tried not to make the video like 3 hours long. So I got 18 good tips for you here. And then if there's, clamor for a lot of other tips, then maybe we'll do part 2 in the future. But was a fun one to make. Thanks everybody for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.